So do make sure you don't run over 20 minutes, otherwise I'll have to cut you off, unfortunately. Okay. So we've got their presentation first of all. Then we've got a couple of minutes break just to come up with some questions for group 2. Remember, I am looking for 2 questions per group, if at all possible. So while they're speaking, obviously get your notepads out, make a note of what they're actually talking about, this kind of thing. Group 3, can you put your hands up again for me? Group 3, again, you're doing a peer review this week. So again, you want to be looking at the content that they present, as well as the style with which they present it. Can I ask group 1, did you receive comments from group 2?
You got it here.
That's okay, yeah, just make sure it's passed over. Okay. Excellent, thank you very much for doing that. Brilliant, so any particular questions from anybody? No, everybody happy? Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant, wonderful. Could you just let me get back to the back room, sorry? Right. In your own time, guys.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here. My name is Kareem.
My name is Suki.
I'm David.
I'm Annie.
And I'm Ben.
Yeah. And our presentation today focuses on the pencil industry, and in particular how the 2 main companies in the industry, who are Faber-Castell and Dixon Ticonderoga, which we refer to as Dixon, face the challenges that globalization results in. So, first, who would like to have a quick guess on when were pencils first mass-produced? Any guess?
Go on, somebody guess.
1850.
1662 in Nuremberg, Germany.
Well, Nuremberg, Germany was actually the birthplace of the first mass-produced pencils in 1662. This was apparently achieved by gluing sticks of graphite into cases assembled from 2 pieces of wood, as you can see here. Despite the fact that it is such an old environment, despite the fact that it's an old industry, it is still as interesting and vibrant today as it was hundreds of years ago. There are approximately now 170 companies operating worldwide in the pencil industry, making it a very competitive market. Technology is obviously now rapidly developing, and there's a common perception that tablets, cell phones, computers, and printers, and other writing and drawing instruments will actually replace the wooden-cased pencil. However, in fact, the demand for pencil is actually increasing. The industry has long been categorized by a high degree of international trade, particularly in the supply of base raw materials and with the trade of finished goods. So, since 1795, Dixon has been an industry-leading company in writing instruments and other art supplies. It was founded by Joseph Dixon and became a dominant player in the American pencil industry, with employees totaling about 1,403. By 1990, 4 billion pens were produced each year in the USA. A good chunk of them produced by Dixon at its plants in Florida. In 2005, the company was acquired by another company called Fila, which is a manufacturer of school and art supplies based in Milan, Italy. Founded by Caspar Faber in 1761, Nuremberg, Germany, Faber-Castell were and still are pioneers in pens, pencils, and other office equipment. It is actually the oldest company in the pencil industry and is still led by a member of the Faber family till this day. It operates 14 factories and 20 sales units worldwide and employs a staff of approximately 7,000. Although its production began in Germany, actually now its premium pens are produced in Germany only, while other consumer products are now made in Brazil. Today, we see in industry after industry how the competitive forces of globalization, innovation, and trade policy, they are transforming industry structures, leading to new winners and new losers all the time. As we can, both companies faced huge challenges due to globalization. However, we can see that Dixon was entered into an agreement in 2004 to be acquired by Fila and was eventually bought for 22.5 million in 2005. By contrast, the German pencil manufacturer Faber-Castell survived as an independent company, although it suffered very similar challenges. So now I will pass my word to my colleagues who will tackle some questions and hopefully provide you with a clear answer.
So now let's look at the first question. To what extent can the differing fortunes of Dixon and Faber-Castell can be explained by the varied responses to the challenges posed by the globalization of business activities since 1990? Obviously, the main effects of globalization on business would be the changes of trade policy. The trade barriers was reduced due to 23 nations signed the General Agreements on Tariffs and Quotas, which encourage free trade by regulating and reducing tariffs and quotas. Exports and imports have increased significantly by shipping from overseas because the production costs are comparatively different between countries. For example, China, Vietnam, and Thailand have cheaper labors and raw materials compared to the US.
This allowed foreign competition to boom, so much so that in 1993, US pension manufacturers lobbied the US government to impose anti-dumping laws on Chinese manufacturers. However, foreign manufacturers were so much more price effective that they still managed to increase the amount of imports into the US whilst keeping the import price down. Even so from China, where the anti-dumping laws were imposed on, 37% of all pencil imports to the US are from China, which represents about $60 million. US-made pencils represent a decreasing amount of the US pencil market, 28% in 2004 and only 14% in 2008. Let's hear more about Dixon.
So, thanks Ben. Dixon's main product is actually the number 2 yellow pencil, a heavily standardized product that is really easy to produce. They have low profit margins, but they're the most popular in the US, so we probably haven't seen them in the supermarkets around here. And as Ben already said, Chinese pencils flooded the US market in the mid-90s because Dixon's product was produced at a low price by foreign competitors. So actually, here we can see Dixon's revenues for the years 1993 till 2004. And there was a strong decrease in 2000 when it started globalization, and there was 82 million revenues in 1993 with 0.5 million of net income, whereas in 2000 they had 103 millions of revenues and 0.8 millions of losses, meaning that there must have been a reduction in efficiency in the plants. And they didn't have any R&D spending and no marketing spending either. So now let's speak about Faber-Castell and the marketing mix. Faber-Castell markets a product as being top of the market, right? And the quality is superior not just through materials, but also through the pricing strategy, because of the price skimming strategy they use. They also use differentiation. For example, they reacquired their trademark rights in the US in 1994, and they cater for different market segments, such as the high-class segment and the working age segment, also children. And they have a really big product portfolio compared to Dixon.
For innovation, in 1980, Faber-Castell expanded its product range and its category grew to over 70 pages over time, which includes professional art and graphic, kids and school, technical drawing pens, and nursery pens. One of the innovations includes the use of water-based coatings to make pencils more environmentally friendly and innovate new pens without harmful chemicals. The second innovation was to introduce an ergonomic triangular shape that is popular with children. In addition, the third innovation was to add rubbery dots that keep the pencil from slipping out of hands. Faber-Castell and Stella are rival companies. Faber-Castell was the first to brand top-quality pencils, while Stella was the first dedicated producer of wooden pencils on record. So let's see how Faber-Castell can survive in this competition.
So looking back at Faber-Castell, as I already said, they differentiated their markets. They used different market segments with 40% revenue from the segment of 3 to 12-year-olds, basing on the principle that when you're young and you buy something and you like it, you are more likely to buy it later on in life. Just got lost in my slides. Please continue. And now about what the source of competitive advantage. This was actually a theory made in 1985 by Porter, but it's still commonly used after 30 years. Dixon clearly used a cost leadership strategy. The problem was that as the other manufacturers from China entered into the market, they lost their competitive advantage. The internal cost cutting proved to be effective in the short run, but not in the long run, because of their low brand image, the low quality of their product, the low advertising expenditure, and the high risk that incurred because of the small portfolio they had. It is also a product-oriented business, as in they sell what they can produce. Now, Faber-Castell, on the other hand, has got a high branding focus. They've got a high-quality product and a good differentiation strategy. They're more market-oriented, so they produce what they can sell. Theodore Lewitt, a theorist in the 1970s, written a paper, Marketing Myopia. Since Faber-Castell is a family-owned business, it is more likely to do strategic thinking, as in the long run. Dixon, however, is publicly owned, so it focuses more on quarterly returns, and this is one of the problems of the stock markets, and probably one of the problems of Dixon.
So, where exactly did Dixon's management go wrong that made it lose out on this long-term industry that was continuing to grow? It was a collection of errors that brought Dixon down from their prestigious status. One of the most crucial factors was their management structure, which led to many other interlinked problems. Dixon has been transporting raw materials such as graphite and wood all the way from Mexico, China and Korea back to the USA for production, where the labour cost is relatively high. To which, Gino Parla, who became the CEO of Dixon in 1983, said, "Our operations are really not all that labour intensive, and so the company has no real need to ship its work offshore or to Mexico as many US manufacturers have done." Dixon failed to create a sufficient management system, unlike Faber-Castell, who have their very own integrated management system called Fabicus. It uses standardization and unified requirements to ensure identical, efficient implementations of the corporate strategy in every country. For fiscal 1990, Dixon's losses totaled to $5 million American dollars, while sales reached a record of $82 million. The long-term debts amounted to $26 million, and compared to a record of $32 million a year earlier. Panicking at the losses, Parla tried to make changes to the company in order to effect a recovery. Part of his action was getting rid of middle management, as well as closing down 2 inefficient manufacturing plants in Ontario and Shelbyville, Tennessee. Dixon has also reduced its number of products from 4,700 to 2,000, as well as eliminating businesses which do not serve individual consumers, schools, as well as other retail clients. Parla also suggested the reason for the poor financial performance was due to the lack of dependable workers. He mentioned that, "I hired guys that I thought could run the company, but they just didn't know how to run the business." And in 2002, the company has made further changes by letting go 115 of their American workers after asking them to train their Mexican replacements as preparation for the relocation of the Sandusky plant work. That caused a lack of motivations from the American workers, and that results in a lack of new workers who are undertrained.
Now I'm going to talk a bit about the challenge of corporate social responsibility and brand image that the two companies faced. Over the last 30 years, there's been increasing pressure on large firms to produce responsibly. Globalization has made the impacts of producing in other countries much more transparent, and MNCs must take care not to be seen as being unethical and weaken their brand image, especially companies such as Faber-Castell and Dixon, who use large amounts of raw materials, producing 1.5 million kilograms of finished wood-based pencils a year. The two companies have very different approaches to this challenge. Faber-Castell, on the one hand, made massive investments, both environmentally and socially. In 1993, they introduced the first non-toxic lacquer in the production of pencils. They also produced 10,000 hectares of sustainable forest for pencil wood in Brazil, and they also produced social programs. For example, in 2001, a program in Brazil which encouraged their workers to go out into the community and get involved in charitable products. They also have a strict code of conduct for how their workers should be treated. As a result, they're carbon neutral, and they've won many awards, both on the management side for ecological and also social. So what does this mean? This means that they have a strong brand image, and it justifies their position at the high end of the market with high prices. Most importantly, it differentiates them from other Chinese manufacturers. Dixon, on the other hand, as we mentioned before, had a distinct lack of research and development. This extended to their environment and social departments. Socially, it can even be seen as negative, being insulting and disrespectful to some of their US workers. The leader of the union said that's about as low as you can go after workers who had been fired were made to train their Mexican replacements. As a result, they had a weak brand image and no differentiation from Chinese manufacturers, and potentially even worse, insulting workers in the US, which is their main market.
So globalization is a very important yet challenging part for companies to take on. And unfortunately, Dixon became a victim of globalization, which not only cost them an arm and a leg, but it also allowed other pencil companies to take this chance to get their mark into the pencil industry. And so Dixon was only selling products in the USA, which meant that market was smaller than it could have been. They also didn't take advantage of having factories elsewhere, and so the production cost was quite high as well. And when Dixon tried to globalize in the year 2000, they were losing market shares already because all the other companies have already globalized the businesses. So then, how could Dixon have overcome globalization?
That's a good question. Many people would argue, including the ex-CEO, Haller, if they reacted to the market changes quicker and moved production abroad, they could have decreased their production costs and kept up with market competition. They're a large established company, and they could have made use of economies of scale and outproduced firms in China. It was my judgment call, and I was totally wrong. This is what Haller said on their slow response. However, with increasing competition from overseas, many think a similar strategy to Faber-Castell would have been more successful. Dixon had a large heritage and a strong brand identity in the US. Rather than compromising quality for price, they could have remained price competitive by investing in their inefficient US factories, whilst maintaining a high quality, made in the USA brand image, which would have been great over the last 15 years after there had been many public campaigns promoting economic patriotism in the US. Dixon could have used this trend to their advantage. By basing their business strategy on innovation, sustainability, and a strong brand image, rather than solely being price competitive, we believe that Dixon could have achieved the same success as Faber-Castell, or maybe even more. Before we open the floor to questions, we've got a quick quiz where we're going to give half people the answers and half people the questions. I'd like to stand up and you have to find the question to your answer.
You have 2 minutes to do this.
2 minutes to do it.
It might be like one between
These
two.
are the same questions. Do you want to chuck me some?
Come on guys, get up. You only have 2 minutes to do this.
No. Are you sure you shot this today?
That's it. You were next to me.
They were all next to each other.
It was a double bluff.
Man
management system, anyone? No?
Maybe question out loud.
Two people left?
No?
Oh, yours?
Sorry.
Yeah, that's not.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, ready for questions then.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's fine. Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so can we just take 5 minutes or so in our groups to think about some questions for group 2? I'm looking